Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few quick items to go over while all the attendees kind of trickle into the webinar. We have quite a bit of information to get through today and definitely want to be able to answer as many questions as you may have. So as those come up, feel free to enter them into the Q&A or the chat, and we will address those at the end of our presentation. This session is also being recorded, so we can post it to the website for those who may not be able to attend. And I think that's actually all I have. So with that, I will hand it over to Robin Fergus. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Brittany. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are here to share an update about our retirement plan review process that has been underway for the past few years. And I will be facilitating this discussion with the assistance of my colleagues, Joseph DeVerde, who is the associate professor from our chemistry division, and also the committee chair of this project. Joseph has been a wonderful partner as we have journeyed through a very in-depth and comprehensive review of our retirement landscape. And we also have our partner from INNOVEST Solutions, Gordon Toole. Gordon has been guiding the committee and sharing the expertise from the financial expertise from the retirement plan landscape as we've journeyed along this review. So you'll be hearing from all three of us today. And my role is the Vice President of Human Resources for the university. So for those of you I haven't had the privilege of meeting, welcome and thank you for joining us. And we'll dive right in. So a little history. We have, as an institution, been working with a defined contribution plan since the early 90s. Some of you may have been here during that transition. Previously, the PARA defined benefit plan was the only plan available for our institution at that time. And there was a desire from our former leadership team to introduce what was very prevalent at that time in the higher ed and private sector landscape, defined contribution plan. And so the design of our plans at that time reflected that model. We had about 27 fund choices then. We have grown exponentially with our fund options, which has come with some confusion. I think some folks are paralyzed when they have too many choices, and we'll talk more about that later today. But we have well over 300 fund choices in our multi-vendor landscape today, as well as the supplementary retirement plans, the 403B, have equally as many, if not more, choices. Where we are today is the landscape has changed a little bit in the higher ed and private sector retirement savings accounts. And we are seeing more of a trend to move to a single record keeper environment, offering more limited fund choices in certain cases. So we took it upon ourselves as an institution to do a very deep dive. We regularly review the retirement plans and are in regular contact with our vendors, having conversations about the services and offerings that are provided. However, this was the most comprehensive review that has been done since the inception of the program. And we have a great deal to thank our committee members about, because they really journeyed along a very intense and deep educational review to provide their best practice and to learn about best practices in the industry and provide their recommendations to the institution. Next slide. So back in early 2020, in the spring of 2020, as we were kicking off the global pandemic, this committee began its work to review our environment. And the focus has been on the defined contribution plan, but also looking at the voluntary 403B options and our student employee retirement plan, which is abbreviated as SERP. Any paid employee is a contributor to the SERP plan. We are a non-Social Security employer, so anyone who's paid by the university does contribute in some fashion to these plans. To be clear, this does not include a review of the para plans. We were only looking at our institutional offerings. And the committee, as I've already mentioned, worked very closely with INNOVEST Solutions to learn about our environment and make their recommendations. We had a very robust committee made up of folks that support the University Benefits Committee. Both of our Administrative Professional Council and Faculty Council representation was there, including Joseph, who will speak in just a few minutes. And we also brought in others' expertise from the institution, from our financial services group. So we had a great committee, and Joseph will share a little bit more about the makeup of that committee as we go along in the presentation. And it took a long time because we did such an in-depth review, and we also had some of the limitations of the pandemic to contend with. Moving to a virtual environment definitely slowed our progress, but we're excited about where we've come and where we're going. Some of the components that went into this work included a detailed participant survey, and we'll talk more about that survey and the results we've received, as well as educational workshops done virtually through webinars. And then we worked with INNOVEST to create a request for qualification, where we solicited input and interest from vendors from our current environment. The multi-tiered environment that we have today includes 3 retirement vendors: AIG, TIAA, as well as Fidelity. And they were welcome to submit their interest through this RFQ process, as well as any other vendor who saw an opportunity to work with CSU. And then, of course, we worked with INNOVEST to benefit from their best practice advice and all of their environmental research. They work closely with higher education institutions as well as private sector, and we're very fortunate to benefit from their guidance. Next slide. As we went about the RFQ, we were subject to the procurement rules, and I would like to share just a little bit about those rules. We went into this effort knowing that there was a potential to add or delete some of our existing vendors, and that during the procurement process, we had to all sign confidentiality agreements to not reveal any of the interest that we received until final decisions were made. And that is done very intentionally for a few reasons. One, we don't want to jeopardize the ability for the university to leverage the negotiations with the final vendor or vendors, but also because our recommendations from the committee and via human resources will be brought to the Board of Governors ultimately for their approval. They hold the final decision. Whichever direction the university takes must be approved by the Board of Governors at the end of the day. So at this time, I want to clarify, we will not be able to share the final recommendation or a decision about which vendor or vendors will be selected, because our plans include bringing the research and recommendations to our Board of Governors here in the fall of 2022 in hopes that we'll have a decision later this year. And I'll turn things over to Gordon to share a little bit more about INNOVEST and the work that they do.
Great, thank you, Robin. My name is Gordon Toole. I am a partner with INNOVEST Portfolio Solutions. INNOVEST is a Denver-based retirement plan consulting firm, and we specialize in helping public and educational organizations optimize their retirement plans. Importantly, INNOVEST is completely independent. We are a registered investment advisor. We have no conflicts of interest, and as such, INNOVEST acts as a fiduciary to the plans that we consult to. A little bit about those fiduciary responsibilities and your retirement plans. Ultimately, CSU's retirement plans would not exist without the university. So the university has the ultimate fiduciary responsibility, and in turn, the need to see Board of Governor approval on any decisions that are made. The university, however, can delegate fiduciary responsibilities to others, and part of that does occur as other decisions can be made around the plan. All fiduciaries, though, must follow certain responsibilities. We detail these on this particular page. We would say most importantly, the duty of loyalty and the duty of prudence. And duty of loyalty, really just stating that fiduciaries must act in the best interest of plan participants when they make those decisions. Turn the duty of prudence, fiduciaries must use a prudent process when making decisions, gathering the facts and circumstances around those decisions, and then using the care, skill, and caution of a prudent expert in really just making a reasoned decision. Robin noted that INNOVEST really assisted both the committee and the procurement group in issuing that RFQ. The RFQ was issued, and we asked those respondents to answer questions in several key areas. Right up top really is employee services, education, and communications. And this is very important, as these are the services provided to you as those individuals within the plan. This is how these firms help you achieve and continue through a successful retirement. And we look at the organizational stability, focus, and experience of these firms, and the experience and focus of the firm in providing these services to retirement plans, and ultimately, and the participants in those retirement plans, as well as the strength of the firm and their ability to continue in this really aggressive retirement industry. Sort of an emerging area is cyber and data security, really ultimately keeping your information safe, a very important part of the retirement industry at this point in time. The quality and record keeping, compliance, and plan sponsor services. Did the firm do a quality job of keeping accurate records and accounting for your accounts, and ensuring that the plan's managed in a manner that complies with Internal Revenue Code? Very important to maintain the qualified status of these plans. And then ultimately, this is a service industry. So the service staff background, experience, and the credentials and the client load that these service individuals have. They serve you, the participants in the plan, as well as staff that work with the plan. And then ultimately, the proposed participant fees from these providers. As participants in the plan, you pay those plan fees. So this is a very important factor. As part of the process, the committee, with INNOVEST assistance, issued a survey to employees within the plan. And this was very helpful. The responses were very helpful in the committee and thinking about how the plans could evolve as they go through the review process. Major themes that were included in the responses was there is a definite desire for more communication regarding the plans. Respondents want more individual assistance. Ultimately, we see that very common within the retirement industry these days. Employees want help with their accounts. They want help with understanding their retirement plans. They want help navigating toward that successful retirement. Respondents don't fully understand the retirement plan options. This is, I think, relating really to this desire for wanting help around their plans. And there is a lack of understanding of the plans by some. Ultimately, respondents value lower costs over more services. This will create a little bit of a need to balance between providing more communication and individual assistance, as noted that the desire was for above, while ensuring that those costs for the plan are reasonable. And then really lastly, in the survey, respondents indicated that they value the quality of the investments available within the plans over the quantity. No need to provide many investments if they are quality investments. So there was a desire for better investment options versus having access to many options. And really just a few thoughts around the retirement, higher education retirement plan environment before I turn it over to Joseph. And really what we're seeing is the retirement plans are facing a more complex world moving forward, with continued increases in the compliance requirements and the regulations overseeing plans, and really greater need for plan disclosure and plan notifications. University staff must meet the legal and fiduciary requirements of the plan as we see this increasing complexity and the increasing difficulty in meeting those responsibilities, but they also need to do it with the goal of helping you reach a successful retirement. And what we've seen really is that universities across the country are responding to these challenges by reviewing their plans, much like the process that CSU has gone through. Ultimately, making plans simpler in an effort to keep employees, help employees understand the plans better has been a very common reaction within the industry. With that, I'm going to, I believe, turn it over to Joseph DeVerde.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Robin, for your introduction. I'm going to speak today from the perspective of the committee. I chaired the committee, and from the perspective of a participant in the programs, the plans, which we'll be calling there. Next slide, please. So as it's been mentioned before, we have a couple of plans, and it's important for us as participants, either current, retired, former, to understand a bit of these plans. And I'll spend a brief moment here giving a couple of salient features of them. As in all of us in this country, we're required in one way or another to plan for our retirements. The Social Security system is a national system which provides for that, but state law in Colorado prevents CSU from participating in Social Security. Interesting feature of state law, but that's what it is. So the university has a system of the defined contribution plan. This is separate from PERA, which is state plans, and you may be a participant in one of those. We're only talking about the defined contribution and the mandatory and voluntary plans here. Students also participate. All the folks that you see running around here as work study or GTAs, they participate in this plan. We as participants deposit 8% of our gross income in there, and the university matches that at the 12% level, which is a nice feature to that. We have a membership of the committee here. I said I serve as chair. A number of folks in here. There were 5 of us in total of the direct committee. Sue Doe from faculty council chair participated. Catherine Duras, former admin pro council chair, has been on that. Bolivar Senor, who is University Benefits Committee chair, professor, and retired now at points unknown. Lacey Snyder also participated as administrative professional and as a knowledgeable as a associate university controller. We were advised in great measure by our human resources team, the Robin Fergus you heard from before, Bill Wiley, who's here also, and Terry Scher, all on that. And also from INNOVEST, the Gordon who we just heard from, Wendy Dominguez and Troy. They're all part of that and were a great part of our education. The folks who came into this committee as beneficiaries of the plan had various degrees of knowledge in this space, all far less than experts in the field. Okay, have the next slide, please. The present situation, as Robin outlined very briefly, was that the plans have been monitored, but we went through an extensive refresh of the plans. We looked at all of the aspects that we could of the plans. We explored the various possibilities, understood the environment that in personal and retirement investing has evolved over decades, and noted some of the particulars of that. As Robin mentioned, the number of active funds has exploded tenfold over the course of lifetime there. Plus, administration costs have risen substantially. So we went through and looked at all of these particulars. Next slide, please. I set out as chair to give us a direction, to help us decide a direction. And what we decided was to figure out what are the structures, processes, and culture. We looked at that very broadly to provide a framework for a successful achievement of our own individual retirement plans. That's what we're trying to do. Employees of the institution, our colleagues, our friends, our family members, all in this boat together, and we wanted to look at this to make the most successful for all of us. Next slide, please. I will not underestimate, it's already been said, this has been tough stuff, dealing with experts. Any of you who are geochemists or former geochemists in webinar will get this joke more than others, but none of us really know what olivine and feldspar are. You know that you're the experts on that. And we had to work with folks who are experts in investment. We learned, I still don't even know how to spell fiduciary, but we've had to work with it. Next slide, please. We set up goals, all right? We went through a list of goals. We wanted to, in the modernization, we want to have a best-in-class lineup of investment choices. I do not spend my days reading the Wall Street Journal or the Times financial sections. I have other things to work on. There are people who do spend their time doing that with either coffee or margarita or whatever they do. They read those and they keep track of those things. And I would like those people to help find the best opportunities. How we define best in class is principally a financial return. That's why we're investing. There are other activities that we will engage in, we will choose, but primarily that's what we need to do. We need to get some good returns. We also want to set up rationalized and simplified investment choices. As Gordon mentioned, the feedback that was received in the survey, one of them was so many choices we have, and it's hard to make rational, good decisions. So we want to rationalize that, and that means simplify. It definitely means that. The third item here is a very important part of that, and that is to reduce participant administration fees, And participants, employees, that's you and I who are the participants of this. The money that goes into administration fees come out of our pockets. There are several kinds of fees associated with a plan like this. One is a fund fee. If you're an individual investor and you go out and buy stock, you can do that these days very much on your own. If you use a service to do that, something like E-Trade or some kind of investment, a broker, you'll pay a fee to buy that stock. If you invest in mutual funds, there will be someone who manages those funds, and that's the person who's reading the Times and the Journal, and we will pay management fees for that privilege of investing in that person's choice. Administration fees for the plan are on top of that, and they're necessary for the people who keep our records, literally the record keepers, the ones who keep track of all the trucks of money going around with our retirement funds in them. And they have administration fees. And we find that those have grown somewhat disproportionately over the years, and we want to reduce those. We want to examine carefully and clearly the various employee category characteristics. We have a number of different ones, and we needed to understand them well. We want to increase education resources to respond to all of us who think I could use more information on this here. And we also set out to protect retired former employee participants, also their investments. Next slide, please. In brief, the plan looks like this. We have 3 record keepers, AIG, Fidelity, TIA. The names of these change variously and have somewhat very recently. There's no master administrator. That's a technical piece that says one ring to bind them all for the LOTR fans. Can be a master administrator which controls all the other record keepers. We don't have that. We do have over 300 investment options in the DCP and over 300 in the 403 plan. There's a lot of stuff out there. Some of those investments are proprietary with some of the individual record keepers. Some of them are not. It's a complex landscape that we have to work with in both managing it on a daily basis and envisioning a step for the future. And one of the early questions to the chat was, how does this affect retirees? And I'm afraid the short answer is it's complicated. It depends, and we'll get into some of the details here, but it depends upon the particular investment funds that an individual is involved in and how they work, right, and what our ultimate decision of the Board of Governors will be. But as an example here, let's get concrete about this. An example from a recent year is the total cost for record keeping was $3 million. That's $3 million that you and I paid for the privilege of participating in this plan. And it's broken down in some subdivisions there. And we know that this can be reduced, and that's something that we want to do. Next slide, please. Okay. Doesn't want to be on that slide. This slide here is an experiential slide. It is not meant to be read by those of us who are still wearing glasses here. But the point of this slide is there to highlight some of the breadth and the depth of the funds that are available. And there's a wide disparity between the most active funds and the least. On the bottom left-hand kind of the screen there, if you can see that, there's one particular account that has 3 investors in it. 3 participants are in there. And we're all paying for the breadth of this. We all do. So we have to balance and manage that breadth. Next slide, please. Feedback was mentioned, was very was significant. And financial performance was important. Understanding education. Most of us, if you can think back to those days that you first joined the university or first started working, you got some forms to fill out, a lot of forms to fill out. And one of them is, how do you want to get into your investments? And it's like one more form, and I have to figure out what the terms are and everything. So there's a real not a disincentive, but there's a real barrier to entry to get into the programs and get into them well when someone's just starting up work. Next slide, please. We had a lot of detailed information here. Again, another experiential slide. Why did you pick things? The top question on here is, why did you pick a particular record keeper? And the top answer was no clear reason. I have no idea. I don't know which one I like better. I'm just going to throw darts at the wall. We'd like to do better than that. Next slide, please. Education is important, and this is for the quants in the audience, all right? When you think about your retirement portfolio, the so-called miracle of compound interest, this graph here shows the return on every $10,000 of annual salary in our program, right? That includes the employee contribution and the university contribution over decades of growth. And the difference, a percentage point in the annual return rate makes on every 10K, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. The more we can reduce the administration fees, the better off we, the participants, are. And that's one of the goals of the refresh. Next slide, please. So going forward, we have a number of choices. The committee has made recommendations to the Board of Governors. They're working on looking at that, but we want to modernize the plan to reduce the costs. We want to simplify the plan to increase knowledge and foster more active participation. We want to balance cost with an adequate level of participant choice. And we have a lot of friends, colleagues, who have a wide range of tolerance for involvement in this. Some folks want to go on autopilot. Others want to get in there and manage very carefully. We have to balance that. We have to recognize, understand, and design for that in the future. And we need to protect the current participant, right, past employees, their assets. Next slide, please. This is an example of a visual that one might use to say, how do we establish a palette where many folks have a lot of different opportunities to engage in this? And we talk in terms of 3 tiers of investors. The tier 1 investors are the ones who don't want to be involved. They want to basically put their money in and let the system run on autopilot. We certainly want to make sure that those of our colleagues who accept that do not get disenfranchised. They do well. So we need to have some baseline, basic, best in class, so many B's, best in class funds to engage in. The second tier would be those who have a bit more involvement in. You can look at that and say there's a couple of different financial types of choices, but maybe perhaps there's and we'll learn as we go forward, because these tiers, these haven't been identified yet, but it can be envisioned that there will be some folks who will have some cultural choices that they'd like to invest in. And if there's a significant interest in that, we can follow that. You might want to get into a non-petroleum fund, right? Some of these could be in there, international form. And then the third is the tier 3 investors, those hardcore folks who are in there every day, spending a lot of the time on their desktop, figuring out where they want to go and what they want to, how they want to adjust things. Next slide, please. The timeline, as Robin said, has been destroyed by the pandemic. We really started this out a long time ago now, and we got slowed down. We had a lot of learning to do, and we were doing it remotely. So have some sympathy for all those students running around who had to do the same thing during the same time we were doing that. We have it now. But the current projection is to get a Board of Governors decision, Q4 2022. They have a December meeting. We're pushing them to make a decision by that. If and when we get a decision by then, we'll have a switch over to whatever the new state is, whether it be more record holders, the same number of record holders, or fewer record holders. Those are record keepers, not holders. With a switch over in the second quarter of 2023 is what we project. Next slide, please. There's, of course, more information available on a website. Where is there not more information available on a website? hr.colostate.edu, and you can find us over here on the bottom left there, Retirement Plans Review, one of many projects that are going on by our active HR folks. Next slide. So the conclusion, we're working on this. We've made some progress, and we're hoping to drive this baby home in this calendar year here to give us the participants, a better retirement. That's what we're looking for. Thank you for all your attention. And the floor is open for questions, although there are a bunch that have already been into in the Q&A. Thank you from all of us.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Gordon. Brittany, I wonder if you could walk us through some of the questions, or if anyone has a question and would like to come off mute and ask, we're happy to entertain those as well.
Yeah, there were quite a few questions, as Joseph mentioned briefly, about how or why this impacts retirees and former employees. So not sure if we want to expand on that. And then also wanting to know how, if any of these changes are implemented, retirees and former employees will be notified.
Great questions. And I'm happy to feel that Gordon and Joseph jump in. We anticipate that all of these changes, they will impact all plan participants, and that includes retirees as well as anyone separated from the university. So in the case where we were to add or reduce record keepers, there would be a need to map funds for those people that are in plans that are no longer available. And there's a very extensive and quite commonplace process for us to do that. Notification needs, we will absolutely continue to reach out via email. We sent a mailer home to folks about these sessions that you're attending today and other sessions that we're offering. And so we will ensure that a regular communication flow occurs. Gordon, would you like to talk more about a mapping process?
Certainly, as there's consideration to make change going forward, as a fiduciary responsibility, it is a decision to really select and monitor the investments that are available within the plan. That can include the situation where existing investment options that are found as not to be as desirable to stay in the plan are actually transferred to new options within the existing or continued structures. So should some of those options found to be not desirable and there are existing assets within those funds, and Joseph noted that page that had many of those 300 plus options that are available in the plans right now, there would be essentially what we call a mapping exercise. What we do is we look at each of those existing options that might not be available on a go-forward basis, and we essentially transfer those or create a mapping that will transfer those assets to a very similar or like fund. Ultimately, the same style of investment is available regardless of as we take a look at those options. So we'll be mapping into a similar investment option. I would say from a broad level, communication will be very, very comprehensive as this process moves forward. There'll be lots of opportunity to, again, come on to a Zoom meeting like this. There'll be opportunities to attend meetings in person, which will discuss sort of the timing and ultimately details around the change, and then much more both written and digital communications that will go out around all those changes on a go-forward basis. So communications will be extensive, we would say, on a go-forward basis and detailed.
Thank you. There is someone with their hand up, so I'll see. Ed, I believe I granted you permission to talk. Are we able to hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, my name is Ted Weston. I'm a retired faculty member, College of Business. I retired in '07. And for the record, I used to teach a financial planning for retirement class at Osher, the adult ed side of CSU, for several years after my retirement. I was also, my last 2 years at CSU, both the chairman of the Faculty Council Committee on Financial and Strategic and Financial Planning, and also faculty member to the Board of Governors. I'm a tier 3 guy on the analogy that was used recently. And one of the things I've discovered in teaching that financial planning class over the years is exactly the problem you were talking about, particularly with your tier 1 people, as they have absolutely no idea what's going on when making a choice between TF, Fidelity, AIG, that kind of a thing. And then the secondary decision, which is specifically which fund in there, to put my money. And if you follow some work by the Boston College Center for Retirement Research, they'll show you that people on the lower income levels make lower decision-making quality decisions, and therefore the returns have been lower. I just want to say, I wish I'd known about this project, going on since I've been in this area for over 20 years and family-wise over about 50 years. One of the things I did not hear come out is your people have to be told if they're making these decisions, if they're also have enough where they can qualify for Social Security, people have to understand the importance of windfall elimination on what's going to be on their Social Security check. So I just wanted to say, I wish I'd known about this. I'd love to have been a participant and helper through my retirement years. I've been retired now 15 years, but this is part of my background.
I'd like to speak to Ted for a number of reasons. Ted, I know you personally because you were one of the faculty involved in my MBA program about 20 years ago.
Okay, good.
And I also have been chair of COSFIP, so we share both of those. So thank you for your comments. You're right on, and the windfall elimination provision is an important one. We do have a lot of, there's going forward, there will continue to be, there'll never be an end to the amount of education that's necessary. That much has been clear from all the work that all the participants in this in the process have seen. We need to have more in there. Thank you for your comment.
Am I still back on?
Yes, you are.
One of the things I found when I was doing the Osher class, the financial planning for retirement class, is when I would get to the point and I'd say, well, people, you've got work before the university. how many credits do you have? Do you have enough to the 40 credits? We used to call them 40 quarters. How many of you are qualified for that? And their bunch of hands would go up. And then I'd say, well, do you get your Social Security statements? Used to be about 90 days before your birthday. And people would get up there and I said, well, you see the number on there that's going to tell you your estimated retirement. And people say, yeah, I see that. And some of them even had it in the class. I said, well, you have to ignore it because of windfall elimination. At that point, the class erupted. I mean, that happened every time I taught that class. They had no idea that they were subject to windfall elimination.
Yeah,
That needs to be clearly brought out.
you're not wrong.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But there's also a lot of good data coming out of there from Boston College Center for Retirement Research. I don't know if anybody follows that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There was a question about if the slides will be available on the HR website, and they will. So the links that came via email and on the postcard that you may have received, that's the website where a recording and the Q&A and the slides will be posted. So thank you for that question. There is a question in the chat now that says, what will the Board of Governors actually be voting on in December? Do we get to see what they will be given for consideration?
I'm actually typing an answer to that right now. So maybe I would have to speak to that. So my answer in short is the Board of Governors does not answer to us, and we're asking them to make the decision. We're trying to convince them to make the decision. We're working hard to do that. And we'd like to get that done as early, and early, I say that in quotes, at that point. We cannot divulge what they're going to see because doing so would reveal the recommendations before they've actually been made. You think about this as a circumstance where where in your home, you're going to go out and buy a car or some other piece of capital equipment, and you're talking to a couple of different vendors of that. You'd like to get the best deal possible. And so you don't want to show your hand too early to them in order to get the best deal. So that consideration, that way of actually negotiating is present and we have to work with. In addition to that, this is the state university with a state controlled, very well controlled, very tightly controlled procurement process. And there are rules for the procurement that we have to operate under. And even if we wanted to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, we're enjoined from doing that. We're prevented from doing that. So we have to be careful with that. So I'm not certain, and Robin, you may be able to speak after certainly after the decision made, you'll know what the decision is. I'm not sure if the recommendations will become available after that. That becomes a delicate circumstance, and perhaps I think I'll ask Robin to speak to that in her officious capacity.
My understanding is that assuming we are granted the permission to present at the December board, that the conversation at that time would be public. The recommendation would be voted on, and that would be available for all to see. At this time, we are still, as Joseph indicated, subject to the scheduling and decision making of the board. So we're targeting December. So we say that with the caveat that, excuse me, we're aiming for that date. However, we do not know for certain at this stage if it will go, in fact, on the agenda.
Thank you. There's another question in the Q&A. Is there a priority to consolidate retirement fund partners across CSU Pueblo and CSU Global with CSU Fort Collins?
I was getting ready to answer that one in writing also. If I might, I asked that question around also some time ago, and I've been informed that Pueblo was being coming from before entering the CSU system. It was in a different group of university or colleges, and so it has a different covenant and is governed by a different set of rules than CSU is actually So it will not be brought into our system. That's my understanding.
This recommendation from this committee is for the programs that support both the CSU system office and the Fort Collins campus. We do not have any current plans to look at global or Pueblo. As Joseph mentioned, there are some different governing rules that prevent us from looking at Pueblo at this time.
I don't see any other questions at this point, but if there are any, oh, looks like David. Can you unmute yourself now, David?
Yes, I have a question concerning to what level will the restrictions on current investments be? For example, I have an IRA that is at a fixed rate of return, and it's very advantageous because it was put into effect years ago. Will the decisions that are made now possibly preclude that continuing? And will that require me to invest it in something else?
Gordon, would you like to speak about the potential for changeover? I think as we outlined before, there would be a mapping activity to find funds that are closest to the existing options should we lose any of our current lineup. But Gordon, perhaps you could go into a little more detail.
Excuse me, Bill Wiley could, excuse me, David, you mentioned you have an IRA. So funds in an IRA would not be part of the university's retirement plan. So anything, only those funds that continue to reside in one of the existing vendors in our retirement plan. That's AIG, TIA, and Fidelity would be affected by any of these decisions. So any investment you have anyplace else wouldn't be affected.
This is an investment in AIG.
In an IRA?
Yes.
So you rolled it out of the university's plan and AIG is just managing the IRA.
Okay, so you're saying an IRA is not within the university's plans?
Gordon, can you sort of correct me if I'm wrong on that?
No, Bill, I think you're absolutely correct. If David moved assets into an individual retirement arrangement, an IRA, that it doesn't exist inside the scope of DCP or the 403B plan, then ultimately that's an individual account, and that is an arrangement between David and ultimately AIG outside the plans and wouldn't be impacted by any type of a change with the plans.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Brittany?
Looks like one more just came in about the 403B and having a fixed return rate right now that they would like to keep. Would they be able to get the same fixed rate guarantee with the mapping process?
And that will be a little bit of a open-ended question. There are certain accounts within the AIG parts of the plans that are individual contracts, even though they are within the plan, and they are individual contracts. Those are not impacted in really that mapping process. So we would need to probably do a little bit further understanding in exactly what that product is. Ultimately, if it would be a product that would be impacted, again, we would be looking to mapping at a similar product in any new structure. And really the process of a investment committee that's being established would be to find, again, comparable, if not better products available under this new structure. So that is a big part of the process, is looking at those newly available investments and ensure that they're of at least equal quality, if not better quality than those that are available in the many options right now.
Thanks, Gordon. It does look like Ted has his hand up, so I will unmute you, Ted, if you'd like to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I was just back to the question on IRAs. Anyone can have an IRA, a Roth IRA, anything like that outside of what you're doing out of a 401A or 401K or a 403B. You can have all kinds of things separate and distinct from what you're doing inside the university plans. They have nothing to do with this discussion. So it's a separate deal altogether.
I don't see any further questions at this point. We've got about 9 minutes left. If anyone has any last thoughts or questions. Oh, one more. I'll unmute you, David.
Yes, just to follow up on that, for the retirement money that is in 403 or DCP, any of these things that are within the university's plans, how are we going to find out that changes have to be made? Will the companies, AIG or TIAA, tell us? Will CSU tell us? Will you both tell us? And how much time will we have to make decisions?
Go ahead, Gordon.
Okay, really ultimately both will be informing you. There'll be a lot of communication channels that'll be open. So again, further virtual meetings, in-person meetings probably available on the campus. Digital and hard copy communications will go out regarding all the possible changes. And again, it's fairly complex because there are some assets within plans that can be mapped, some that cannot. So those that cannot will be staying in place. So those become pretty detailed communications. And generally, you'll have lots of reaction time. Ultimately, preferable to be able to provide at least a 60 to 90 day window in which you can react and change if the mapped change isn't desired.
And will these come from the institution, the financial institutions, or from CSU, or from both?
They'll be coming really from both.
Thank you.
All right, we can give it one more minute and see if any more questions come through. Otherwise, like I mentioned, this recording will be posted to the website, and there is another session for retirees and former employees next week. If you have peers who were not able to join, we will be hosting that on, I believe, the 22nd or 23rd. The 23rd. And I will pass it back over to Robin for any closing thoughts.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you to all of those who joined today. We really appreciate your time and attention to this matter. We know how important this is for you as participants, and certainly want to keep you, as we've discussed, in the loop as these changes occur. We will have robust communications, so please join us in future. Once decisions are made, we will share all the updated information as the timing allows. So thank you again, and thanks to our presenters, both Joseph and Gordon, for joining us today. We really appreciate you, and thanks to our facilitator, Brittany. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.